One last thing before we start with the interview, I just wanted to give a shout out and a thanks to the sponsors of Startup Sac, without whose support we would not be able to do what we do. So as you can see on the screen there, our sponsors include Witten Law, SMUD, Bander Insurance, Nivagen Pharmaceuticals, Stoll Reeves, Weintraub Tobin, Ernst & Young, Clifton Larson Allen, and Moneta Ventures. And if any of you guys are here, thank you very much. Now, I think it's time for me to stop showing my screen and stop talking and let Cameron take over and start hearing the story about Anthony. So Cameron, I am going to spotlight you and Anthony and take it away.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Jeff, for the introduction and everyone for being here. Excited to have a conversation with Anthony Romano. So just in kind of getting us started, get to do the pleasure of introducing him and interviewing him as well. So our guest today is Anthony Romano. Anthony currently serves as the CEO of CREtelligent, which enables commercial real estate buyers, investors, lenders, sellers, and developers, the entire ecosystem around commercial real estate to make informed decisions faster. He's had quite the entrepreneurial path as he started his own venture out of Sac State. So he's an alma mater of Sac State. With two other Sac State grads, they started a company. They founded Customer Link Systems, which was acquired by Intuit in 2014, and then later joined C&S Marketing, which transitioned into CoreLogic, where it ended up being acquired by First American. From then, First American, that's when he ultimately joined eScreenLogic, which now is CREtelligent here today. And we'll be getting more into his story. Just wanted to kind of provide an overview. And one of the things I wanted to share before we get started was just this great quote that was in a recent Sac Business Journal article when Anthony was asked, what do you look at when you look at an effective business leader? And so he described an effective business leader realizes that what you know means very little. Your impact is determined by what you continually do. And so I think that's a core component of his story and journey, and looking forward to diving deeper into that in our conversation. And so just kind of getting started, I know I read your high level bio and overview, but would love to hear from you about your story, the entrepreneurial endeavors you've taken on, and just what it means to also be an entrepreneur made at Sac State. So without further ado, we'll turn it over to Anthony for that quick overview.
Excellent. Well, thanks so much, Cameron. And what you and the Carlsen Center of Innovation are doing locally is extraordinary. Dale's an investor in our business. He's been a good mentor to us and probably the quintessential entrepreneur in this region. And so you don't need to look farther than that guy and what he's done. But what you guys are doing is amazing. To watch the college over the last 25 to 30 years since I graduated. And the impact that it's making in the region is really, really wonderful. So congratulations on that. And to Laura and Jeff for Startup Sac. You don't have to be in the Bay Area and in the Silicon Valley to have really good resources and really good mentors and really good opportunities to share and innovate and pitch your idea. And I think Sacramento, was really good 20 years ago, and today it's that much better. And if you look at all the things that are being done across the river and down in Ice Block and in Midtown and downtown, and this is the place to be. And I'm excited to share, the notion of capital raising and all the resources that are here, because there's a lot. So if you're a student out there and you're thinking about raising money or doing things locally, this is the place to do it. So thanks for the intro, Cameron.
Of course. Well, we're excited to have you, and I'm just echoing what Laura threw in the chat. Just the vote of confidence for the region. I think we are at a inflection point, and certainly you've seen Sacramento's ecosystem grow and mature over the years, and so would love for you to kind of share a little bit about that entrepreneurial journey. I know I kind of just did the the little points, but would love to learn a little bit more about that kind of founder experience and starting out of college and how you got to CREtelligent here today.
Outstanding. Yeah. So I born in Brooklyn, New York. Family was a bunch of IBM folks. So IBM was the acronym IBM moved, and we moved to Fairmount, moved out to the Bay Area, and went to high school in the Bay. Came to Sac State with my girlfriend, who's now my wife of 28 years. Happy to say that. That's a key component in success, is having a really awesome partner, and I'm super blessed in that regard. But we came to Sacramento and to the college. And while we, sort of fell in love with the college, the thought process was you graduate and you go back to the Bay Area. And I can tell you, I'm very, very happy that didn't happen. The college at the time, business administration, I sort of took an economics class. It was Professor Peterson. I think he was an outside law professor who came in for a night class, and I fell in love with economics. I fell in love through further coursework with general business, and I realized my passion was business, commerce, and technology. And it was a marketing professor who said, you need to do an internship. It's nice that you're folding clothes at the Gap at Arden Fair Mall, but you might want to get involved in something that's in your field of interest. And so I did that. I actually went my senior year at Sac and worked downtown, did an internship for IBM. I reported to Dave Sanders. I heard that name earlier. I thought that was funny. So Dave has been a great friend and a mentor for years. And then across the street was what used to be called Dean Witter. I think Morgan Stanley acquired Dean Witter after a while, but I was very interested in the markets and in investing, et cetera. And long story short, those two internships really launched my career. I wound up going to work right after Sac State for a worldwide business partner of IBM. It was called International Business Systems, publicly traded in Stockholm, Sweden. Had an office in Folsom, California, right? A place I didn't even know what that was, and I was at Sac State. So they were 4 or 5 people. I joined them. We grew it in a 6-year period, about 350 folks. It was a large ERP application that ran on IBM systems. I wound up running all of the sort of international sales and consulting. Learned just a ton on the way. And it's one of those things in life where you are so fortunate and humbled and blessed for where you are. You're about 30 years old. You learned a ton. You're in your prime, earning years of career, and you don't want anything to change. And then stuff changes. And it was literally like a week later that 2 of the guys that worked for me, who were great friends of mine, we went to breakfast, and they said, "Hey, we're going to go start a company, and we're going to leave." And I was disappointed they were leaving. I was happy for them. And it was a time when my daughter was just born and my wife was traveling for a week, and that never happens. So they said, "Hey, could you help us with the business plan and the pitch deck?" And we spent a couple almost all-nighters. I took a few days off of work. We built the plan. We built the deck. I loved the model. It was sort of a business as a service type of a model in a couple vertically integrated industries. And long story short, we went and met with 4 investors. I think we raised $2 million. And I quit my job the next week, and we started Customer Link Systems. And that was such an amazing experience to go from a small company. You built a fairly significant North American presence right back to, business plan on the back of a napkin. Can we go pull this off? And the 3 of us founded it, all Sac State guys. I left after 3 years. Mark Hockridge, who stayed on as the CEO of Customer Link Systems, ran it for a number of other years and ultimately sold it to Intuit. As an exit. But that was a great experience for me. I got really excited about data and analytics as I was at Customer Link, and saw the real estate ecosystem as a really vast territory for that type of product and solution set. And so I jumped at an opportunity to join the local data and analytics company that was in the real estate market here in Sacramento. I did that and rebranded it a year later to CoreLogic. 2 years later, we had grown sales 800%. We sold it to First American, and now I was part of a $6 billion corporation. And so over the next several years, wound up running, I think about $1 billion of a piece of that business. We spun it off public. I ran it, after that. And the long story short is, learned the entrepreneurial founder, play, got really comfortable in big corporations, but it was clear to me that my passion was, taking a company from kind of 0 to 60. So full circle in 2019, in January of 2019, took the role of CEO at CREtelligent. I'm here today.
Awesome. Well, a lot of good stuff in there. I love the story of Dave Sanders. I was like, that's a stereotypical Sacramento story where just, the degrees of connection here. And, I think that's partly, some of the value of it still being a smaller town and one that you can navigate fairly quickly. And then I just wanted to pull out I really see how data and real estate have always kind of been part of your, entrepreneurial pathway, right? And you've kind of continued to work in that space. And then for our students here, just wanted to point out that Professor Peterson, I think you said was the individual's name, and that kind of outside experience of bringing in a new data point to create that inspiration for you, and that internships are highly valuable. And that's one of the things, we want to help is, more startups to be able to access our interns and be able to have that, startup experience for them. So we kind of left off on, you're the CEO now of CREtelligent, and you kind of came in, it used to be eScreenLogic. Would love to get like an overview. What does CREtelligent do? I gave the high level value proposition, but would love to learn more about what the company does and how it helps the commercial real estate market.
Sure. I mean, I would tell you first, people talk about, boy, when you joined, what was out of the gate, right? As a CEO, you come in and you've got a really well documented 30, 60, 90-day plan that you're going to share with the new leadership team and sort of set direction and strategy. And I did that day one, in January 2019. Came in with guns ablazing, and by lunch on the first day, threw the whole thing away, shit canned the whole thing. And it was a great lesson to me, and I think it's super important that coming up with imperatives and strategies before you really understand the landscape to set direction is a bad idea. And this company, while later it needed a really good foundational strategy and the market, immediately they needed cash infusion, right? So I pivoted quickly and said we're going to go do a capital raise, and there's ways to do that here locally, but it's one of those things where as a new CEO, you sort of walk in thinking you got the playbook, and until you really understand the underpinnings of the business and how things are working and where you're at, it's hard to set direction.
Yeah, so you've had that experience of coming in as a CEO to a growing, scaling startup, and then one from that founder experience. From your experience, what are some of the different kind of mindsets and skill sets that you had to approach to those different situations? You just shared that example of the 30, 60, 90-day plan going out the window, recognizing, hey, that's not actually where the greatest need is, but kind of curious of that mindset. And, as companies morph, the needs and obviously the mentality around that definitely needs to shift.
Yeah, I mean, that word pivot gets thrown around a lot, and if you're doing big, ginormous pivots, I think maybe you got to go back and look at the business plan, operating plan, your kind of culture and ethos, and what you really want to do. But there's new information all the time. I mean, look at we were just talking with Jeff and gang in our little breakout room. When you think about the asset classes in commercial real estate, and for those on this call, you got a single family home, you got a condo, then you got a trailer. That's residential real estate. And everything else, the college, the office I'm sitting in, the restaurant, the shopping mall, the golf, it's all commercial real estate. There are three asset classes right now: retail, office, and hospitality, that have been hit hard. And those were big markets for us. We didn't see that pre-COVID, right? We didn't see the situation. So there's always new information that you sort of need to learn to digest and recalibrate your team and reset your plan. But for CREtelligent, I mentioned residential. There's a bunch of disruption in residential real estate right now. The fact that you can get a Tesla loan for $100,000 in 45 minutes, but it takes you 45 days to refinance your house, it's broken. It's totally broken. So, my daughters would joke with me, Dad, what's a fact? You fax your W-2s, you fax your bank statements, you send this information back and forth. Like, the world's changed, and there needs to be disruption in some of these markets. And on the residential side and the capital market side of real estate and residential lending, there's been a ton of private equity money, a ton of innovation in that level of disruption. CREtelligent does that in the commercial real estate side, and it's one step behind commercial is. The process of getting insights and information and doing what's called due diligence, which is really just before, during, and after a transaction, investigating, researching, analyzing information in order to make a good decision. It is really hard to do, and it's not uncommon for a participant in a commercial transaction to work with 15 or 20 different vendor partners, and their phone calls and emails, and really challenging and costly, and uninspiring to get a deal done. So we created a platform called Radius that allows a user to come on with an address, an APN, or a lat long, identify a commercial property, then order, status, get delivery, and archive any product, service, or solution that we have. So it creates the notion of a bank, for example, an underwriter in a loan. I don't need to go to 25 companies and send them emails and place phone calls for environmental assessments and appraisals inspections and flood zone determinations and all the other information that is compulsory in a deal to get done, we do. And we make it super easy. We collapse the cycle time, we reduce the costs, and the borrower's experience is way, way better. So we do it with banks, with insurance companies, with capital markets players like REITs, et cetera. And it's a very fragmented, dislocated market that's ready for some real disruption.
Nice, I love that. And also probably I'm drawing on your experience in the space and being able to speak the same language, for lack of a better term, right? Of like in understanding some of those, I'll put some jargon, the pains and gains of the, commercial real estate market and, the different actors and trying to get a deal done and where those different constraints are. So, kind of just more pointing out, the more you're knowledgeable in that space and spent time in the industry, you have those additional data points. So one of the things I wanted to point back to was just kind of that founder CEO mentality component. And one of the things that comes to mind, and you're obviously familiar with Dale Carlsen. He's the founder of our Carlsen Center, and one of the things he speaks a lot to in terms of the success of Sleep Train Mattress Center was company culture. And so I'm curious of like getting in your head of kind of that founder and setting some of the culture there and growing the company. Versus coming in where the culture is more established and, you're kind of having to not necessarily react, but be a part of that culture. And so I'm curious of kind of the difference from a mindset standpoint, but also how that's led to the success of both of those ventures.
Yeah, solid question. I mean, I think when I look at my role as a CEO, the way I look at my job is number one on that list is sort of foster the right culture and ethos, and done right with the right underpinnings and the right values and the right, just sort of everybody singing from the same sheet of music, beautiful things happen. And that's a big job of mine, and that's why we don't take hiring people lightly, and our interview process is really different. So that kind of goes right above sort of setting the vision and evangelizing the vision to our staff, raising and deploying capital, and then setting the pace. Those are unique aspects of, I think, a CEO who comes in after the founders, sort of done their job and started the business. Both of those individuals, having been in both of those chairs, I think need to be brutally honest with their self-awareness. And I see it more with founders, and I was one, where you just couldn't get off, your thought process on innovation, on the market, on product, on alliances. It was your baby, and this is what we were going to do. And I think sometimes you really got to be able to, and that could be with mentors and others around you. You got to be able to look at it through different lenses. And often it's easier. I would admit to you, it was easier for me as a CEO with a business that had been running for 3 or 4 years, that was put together for multiple assets, et cetera, to come in and take it to the next level. That first mile is tough as a founder, and you're wearing a lot of hats, and you don't have all the infrastructure and support behind you. It's a tough job. So those are two different roles, and both are incredibly necessary. Most of the founders I've spent time with now are the most innovative, crazy, awesome, unique people that recognize they have the self-awareness to recognize you better surround yourself with other individuals. Your idea isn't going to get funded on your own, right? The CEO's job is to be able to go yard in finance, in development, in technology, in human capital management. Like, you don't just have to have one silo nailed. And putting a good founder with a good CEO, magic happens.
I love that you brought out the self-awareness. That's such a key component. And I was going to ask, and you ended up answering it, was like, how did you gain that additional perspective to like bring into the space? Because that's sometimes where that you have the blinders on is like, oh, we need to pivot or do these certain things to kind of continue to innovate. And it sounded like mentors was a key component. I know a structural thing sometimes is advisors or an advisory board. Is that something that you've experienced with CREtelligent that's allowed to bring in new perspectives, or what were some of those additional, practical examples of gaining new perspective and, kind of scaling from there?
Yeah, no, I don't. I think over the years, I learned early on a scale of 1 to 5. 1 being you're the worst ever at it, 5 being it's your competency and you're perfect. If you're a 4, you could work on things and get to a 5. If you're a 3, you might be able to get to a 4. If you're a less than that, those are things that aren't part of your DNA. And the sooner you can identify what those things are, and you can surround yourself with people that have strength in those areas, it's super critical. I mean, I'm really big into personal and sort of human optimization and doing lots of things to improve. But there's just some things where at some point you say, hey, that's not my dharma. I'm not. That's not my thing. And we're going to bring people in to surround me. I'll be good at this, and they'll be good at that. And that's part of a team. And we really look through that team lens, that the lens of us, not me. And nothing's taken for granted in that regard.
I love it. It makes me think of and not that you used it, but the tool Strength Finders. That's a key one for me, and just kind of understanding what your strengths are and leaning into those and finding people around you that can help fill those other gaps. And speaking of team, I think of how do you build a team? Partly raising funds in order to pay people and bring people on board. And so kind of transitioning to a next phase of questioning was, one, wanting to dive deeper into raising funds and why Sacramento. So you recently successfully raised $6.3 million, which was led by a local venture firm, Moneta Ventures, which is exciting to see. And really that, the local angel investor community also got into that round. So you're really gathering that interest from the Sacramento region. So would love to just kind of, one, from a high level, just what were some of your, tips and tricks or your strategies in going through that fundraising process that some of our, entrepreneurs here that are maybe thinking about fundraising or getting into that space, what they might be able to do and getting going.
Yeah, great. And we were, so originally, to get into the weeds, I was going to do a convertible note, was going to, build a note, figure out a valuation of the company downstream, but get some infusion of capital in the business. And met with, sort of a couple of 3 folks locally and really pushed us toward Moneta. And Moneta Ventures, for those of you who don't know, is a Folsom-based, regional venture capital firm. I think they've got a couple of 3 funds. Maybe there's $100 million under management. I think they're about ready to go raise another fund, but Lakesh Zakaria runs it. Denise Ferry is their CFO, who's a brilliant businesswoman beyond just financials. I worked with her for 7 years at a prior company, so I have a great amount of respect for her. And think Bob and think Sabya Das, who we work with. I mean, they just have a really solid team. And the thing about Moneta that was unique was they were really world-class entrepreneurs that learned how to be VCs. So not, and there's certainly nothing wrong with going to college, working for a consulting firm, going to Stanford and Wharton and coming out and being a private equity guy and with a spreadsheet knowing everything. That's one view. And it sounds horribly derogatory, but I've had the experience there where that doesn't work as well for maybe a company at this stage. Moneta flanked us like crazy beyond capital. They really looked at, corporate governance. They looked at acquisitions that we were doing. We were helping us divest a piece of the business. So they're good business people. And as a venture capitalist, money is only one aspect of it. To sit on the board and to be able to be a mentor and advisor, was super, super cool. So we really were amazingly fortunate to have them, build the term sheet. And you're right, they invested, I think it was just under $2 million. The crazy news was we raised $4 million beyond Moneta on their term sheet right here in Sacramento. I mean, literally right here. So it was the most successful business people that had built companies and had a passion and an interest and an appetite to make further investments in the region. And I spent months with individuals. The guys, the gang at Sac Angels was tremendous. If you look at the makeup and composite of the Sacramento Angels, it's a lot of the who's who. It's people who've been there, done that, and have a heart to give back and want to make investments and be good stewards. So both John and John are amazing running that, and I met so many people there. So then we just went out and we did. Guys were writing $100,000, $200,000, and $300,000 checks, and sometimes folks hate that. Your cap table gets a little messy, and there's a lot of investors, but we really felt convicted about doing it locally with local investors. And I was in the chat room earlier. We had a lot of private equity funds who this management team has a lot of experience and has been there, done that. And I don't mean that arrogantly, but they love the idea of, we want to dump a bunch of money. And most of them couldn't put less than $10 million in. We couldn't take any of their money, right? We didn't have the valuation to be able to absorb that level of investment. And so the great news is we did it locally. We did it with, regional individuals and angel funds and regional venture funds. And now we're going to go back out, and now we're going to go raise $10 million, starting really in the next couple of weeks, with those larger firms. And the beneficiaries of that are going to be all those people that put money in this company in Sacramento. So I'm really, really excited about that.
Love it. Well, it's a great Sacramento story, and one that I think we'll continue to see grow in our ecosystem. And so, wanting to kind of pin back on that Sacramento landscape, I would be remiss if I wouldn't say that I don't know that that's all the experience for all of our entrepreneurs, at least what I'm hearing in terms of the Sacramento region. I think, certainly there's a lot of passion to give back and grow entrepreneurship here. But I have heard, sometimes it's hard to raise capital, and then sometimes I hear it's a pipeline challenge. And so I'm curious of kind of diving deep. One, just why did you choose it to stay in Sacramento? Partly I know you're a Sac State management team, which is some of those deep ties, but would love to kind of hear about, what about the landscape continued to attract you to stay here? And then what can people leverage as they stay in this region?
Yeah, so it was, we were beyond the most earliest stage. You hear people talk about the 4 F's of friends, family, founders, and fools. Those are the first couple bucks you can put into a company to, develop the business plan, maybe do a prototype, get probably not even product market fit, right? It's early stage stuff. But then you're going out to angels and individuals, and we had such a network here. I mean, again, Customer Link was big funded by Roger Akers and Akers Capital locally. We had the Sac Angels at that time invested, and many of those folks were still interested. You've got 3, in my opinion, regionally. You've got Moneta Ventures here. You've got Steve Mills and Kuroka at DCA, and you've got Jose Blanco at Central Valley Fund. Those are not like insignificant funds. Those are really well middle market funds. So you could do, early stage angel investor. You certainly could go talk to Laura and her team at Startup Sac. If you're early stage and you haven't talked to Mark Haney, you're missing the boat, right? You should be out at Haney Ventures talking about, the growth, sort of what they're doing with Sacramento Growth Engine, et cetera. And I'd get to the Sac Angels. If somebody has a market, and I think that becomes the issue where folks start to peel the onion and say, can I make an investment here? You better have a bang up leadership team and a management team that has been there, done that. That's a big plus. The other thing is the size of the market, meaning if this was a couple $100 million market for us, I'd have never done this, right? This is a $10 to $15 billion market, very dislocated, needs to be disrupted. So understanding the size of the market, making sure you've got this right leadership team, and then I think knowing, kind of picking your spots. When you talk about tips and tricks, you can shotgun out to everybody in the world some standard, letter, but these funds, even the smaller ones, they have an investment thesis, right? If you're doing manufacturing of auto parts and you go talk to a SaaS PaaS, VC, you're going to get laughed out of the room. So you got to do a little homework and understand who's got a thesis for what you're doing. And I would tell you, it doesn't matter. Everybody talks about, super multiples of EBITDA and technology and data analytics and PaaS. There's great investors who put money into beauty supply stores, who put money into restaurants, who put money into manufacturing companies. So you just got to go find the right folks with the right appetite and investment thesis for your business and your market. I think that's a big deal that people overlook, and you wind up going way down the road with folks that will never invest in your business.
No, I couldn't agree more. I think you have to, just as you have to find your kind of value proposition for your own business with your customers, right? It's a similar, transaction to some degree with an investor, right? If they're, not investing in Sacramento companies, or if they're, not investing in a particular industry that, don't necessarily spend your time in going to them. So I have two final questions. And so I'm just more putting that out there for people to get their questions ready for you. So the first one that I have The first being is there anything else you would like to share with our audience? I know we briefly talked at a high level about kind of some of the core personal or business principles that's allowed you to grow and ultimately be impactful in your work. And so just wanted to create that space for, was there anything we maybe missed that you wanted to speak to?
No, I mean, for some of the, anybody from an entrepreneurial standpoint or in an early stage business, and I use it here with our leadership team, and these guys have been, around 20, 30 years in big businesses, but I keep telling them, it's a Stephen Covey quote. The main thing is to keep the main thing the main thing. And to the extent you get distracted, you're in big trouble. I don't care how much money you think you have or how clear you're at. When you start to chase the ends of what you're doing, it's a problem. So identifying imperatives of things that are mission critical and then deciding we're not going to get distracted by other things is that's the top of the list for me where I'm at right now. And then I think that at the end of the day, I heard it from Dan Gilbert, who runs Quicken Loans. They were a big customer of ours for years. He said, money and numbers follow, they don't lead. So when you talk about revenue and clients and EBITDA and free cash flow, that's not your strategy. That's the result of a really good strategy and business plan. You got to focus on your market, your client, your employees, and probably not in that order. To me, it's employee, customer, and then investor. You take care of your employee and create a world-class organization to work for. They do backflips for your client spends more money with you, then your investor wins, and not in the opposite order. And so that's a focus for us is really, a culture of wellness, a culture of fitness, a culture of balance. We don't have guys, at 10:30 drinking Mountain Dew coding in the office anymore. We stopped like that. That doesn't work because it works for a sprint, but if I need them in 6 months, or I'm in trouble type of thing.
Right. I love that. Well, the way you put the employee, customer, investors, it makes me think, I don't know if you've ever seen the pyramid of a servant leader where the leader is at the bottom and then you have everything working outwards from there. So just wanted to bring up that graphic because that's what I'm getting from you in terms of your vibe, but also just from the way that you talked about the business. So before I turn it over for open Q&A, I wanted to just conclude, is there anything that this community can do to support you?
Well, I'm looking at some of the members of this community, John and Terry, and these guys that I've known for years that have invested in this business, that I've sat alongside on boards of other companies and have learned a ton. I would just say, stay local. I mean, do it here. If you can do anything for me and for this region, do it right here. This is going to be the hottest place. And if you're a young person right now, there's a lot of opportunities to plug in, and the world's opening up. And the health and human impact has been really sad that we've all participated and watched, but it's going to be in the rearview mirror. And let's get out. Let's not make the handshake and the hug a relic of the past, and let's get back to business.
I love it. Well, I appreciate our conversation, and I think our community can certainly support you. I know I'm passionate about the Sacramento region, and we'll be staying here. So you got one of us at least. So in turning it over for Q&A, it looked like Paul had our first question, and then we'll go to Laura.
Yeah. So Anthony, wow, that's a fantastic story, and the fact that you're a Sac State guy that invested in Sacramento and is staying in Sacramento is fantastic. I'm a Chico State guy. It's kind of similar, but kind of different. But it's awesome that you're supporting the region.
I have fallen down the stairs at the Bear many times, Paul. So I'm with you, man.
Fantastic. And also, I dug out my almost 15-year-old Strength Finders book and worksheet. And if I look at that worksheet, I'll wait till I need to go to sleep. Anyhow, so you covered the past, fantastic, for me at least, and it was a really good story. I guess I'd focus on the future. Commercial real estate is fascinating, and I'm sure you get asked this all the time, but what have you done in the last year or year and a quarter to adapt? And then where do you see, there's so much debate going on about, people are going to go back to the way it was, or they're not, or they're going to be in between, or how do you think commercial real estate is going to develop from here? Because that affects all of us.
Yeah, no. And I talked about it earlier, but when you think about commercial real estate, it's everywhere in our lives. It's the restaurant you go to, the gym you go to, the store you shop at, the office you're in. I mean, commercial real estate is not going away. when people ask me that question, they really talk about office mostly, or they talk about retail. And I think we're seeing retail take care of itself. It's been hugely unfortunate to see some of the small restaurants and hairdressers and massage parlors and delis, and some of those guys, PPP didn't help. So there'll be a reimagining of some of that space. There's no question. You're going to see larger firms come in and treat it a little differently, negotiate different lease terms, and do some workouts in some of the some of the loan agreements. We have a customer advisory council that's made up of chief credit officers and risk officers in many banks, and many of them said, "Hey, we haven't seen a lot of distressed assets yet." Now it'll come because they've had deferral and forbearance, but we think that we're not going to see bulldozers pull up and demolish old hotels, but there'll be a reimagining of use case in some of those scenarios. But I really think in the office, there was years ago at IBM, we used to do hoteling, right? You'd come in for 2 or 3 days, you'd work remote for 2 or 3 days. I think we're all comfortable with that. I think we've seen that things like Microsoft Teams and Office at Hand and Zoom that we're on now, it works for us, but it won't take the place of building camaraderie and having a cup of coffee or having a beer after work with your colleagues. And I would tell you, if you had 100 remote employees in your company and I had 101 building, I'd beat you every time. So I see commercial real estate, a couple asset classes slowing in terms of valuations and maybe a bit of impaired assets, but where interest rates are right now, the 10-year treasury is still under 2. It's crazy what you can get a 10, 20, or 30-year loan for on these assets. So, and there's a lot of money on the sidelines, a lot of dry powder looking at these asset classes, and I think want to get involved.
Beautiful. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Righty, our next question goes to Laura.
So, Anthony, I was interested. You said back when Customer Link started that it was 2 guys that you knew, and you joined them, helped them put the slide deck together for investment. And I'm curious, how far along was Customer Link before you actually got investment? And my hypothesis is that it's harder now to get investment if you don't have traction than it was 10 or 15 years ago. And I wondered if that really is the case, and if you could share some of your knowledge on that with us.
Yeah, I think you're right. We were incredibly fortunate to get put in front of a few investors that, again, this was a back of the napkin turned into a PowerPoint presentation with an idea, where we sat in the office of Gray Care Ware, and they gave us a $7.5 million valuation with a business plan, and we went and raised some money, and we did it in a very short period of time, or frankly, it would have never happened because I would have never left what I was doing. But you're right. Today, the early stage funding is really to prove I can build a team, I can build a product, I can get revenue in a market, I can show that I've got downstream potential product. I mean, that early stage funding is probably, at least from a venture capitalist, more difficult to get. I would tell you that I think at the Sac Angels, doing 17 deals last year and 7 deals year to date, they're looking at stuff. And particularly if somebody comes from an industry where they've had some proven success and a strong business plan and maybe access to other capital, I think there's an opportunity to raise money in that environment. But you're right, it is infinitely more difficult today than I think it was in 2000. Yeah, thanks. Good question.
Awesome. All righty, our next question goes to Daniel, and then it'll be Brian.
Hey, Anthony. So I am looking to start a farm brewery, which the zoning requires a 10-acre property. In El Dorado County, it's 5 acres of agricultural production. In Placer County, it's 2 acres. And so my question is, okay, so being more agriculturally based land, and sort of, based off of sort of a farm format, do you have any suggestions as to avenues for attaining properties that might be out of my personal reach as far as funding and things like that? And then also, for so for funding the brewery equipment and stuff, I know you're more centered with the with the real estate and all of that, but as far as just startup funding for things like that.
Yeah, well, so let me be clear. I work in real estate, but I love beer, so we're going to have a great conversation here. I would tell you again, investment thesis. There are a number of affinity and/or thesis-based investors that invest in breweries, that invest in cannabis, that go down the list of everything that seems like it's outside of tech and SaaS. And there's investment communities out there. So I think it would be great for you to get plugged into others that have done that and done it successfully. I think you're on the ag land. There's a million investors locally and actually banks that do agricultural funding, that understand environmental assessments on that land, that understand zoning and ALTA surveys and things that go with it, Dan. So I mean, I could happy to take your information and hook you up with a bunch of guys at least to have an intelligent conversation with. But on the brewery piece, there's again, I think there's some funds and some individuals we could point you in the direction of to have that initial dialogue to understand what's in store. Where are you in the business or in the process? Have you brewed some batches and have some great stuff and now want to build a plan, or do you have a plan and then you're about ready to?
So I learned how to brew beer back in like 2000. My dad taught me. He used to do home brew, and so I've been sort of in the last couple of years, I've really been writing my own recipes and testing them out on friends and family, and getting some word of mouth spread around and building the website and you know, I have just in the last year, I've picked up like 20 people who are consistently buying from me every time that I brew a batch. I can't brew enough beer at this point. So
Yeah.
as far as that goes, I definitely have some interest going. And so at this point, I'm kind of relying on, I work at Sac State. So, and my wife works full time. So we're kind of relying on our personal finances to look at properties right now. And so I'm just kind of looking for sort of a leg up as far as, because I'm going to have to buy the brewery equipment, which I'm looking at probably about $75,000. And then the properties that we're seeing that would match the criteria that we need are usually about $100,000 out of our reach. And so, you know, we're not looking for millions and millions of dollars. But you know, we are hitting a little bit of a roadblock as far as all that goes.
Yeah, well, so I could happy take it offline, put you in touch with a couple of people. It's it shouldn't be a surprise. It's a crowded space, right? There've been a lot of folks that walked in those shoes and did something in a real small micro market way and expand, you know, and couldn't get beyond, and the revenue model and business model sort of collapsed. So, you know, if it's a lifestyle passion thing, that's one. If it's a business where people put money in and there's a return on their investment, that's another way of looking at it. So, but Dan, I'd be happy to put you in touch with a couple folks.
Cool. I'll reach out to you on LinkedIn right after we're done here.
Sold.
Okay. Thank you.
Awesome. All righty. Our question goes to Brian and then Alec.
Cool. Thanks, Cameron. Thanks, Anthony. I just had a question about, you know, your thoughts overall and like the talent in Sacramento, what you guys are experiencing, finding people, and, you know, how hiring is going, how retention is going, and do you see like the influx of Bay Area people affecting you at all? And is that changing the culture for you and for others in the area? I know it's kind of multiple questions, but just kind of general how you're feeling about Sacramento, because you're obviously really committed to the area, which we all love.
Yeah, thanks. Great question. So, you know, many of the hires that we've done in the last 12 months have not been in California. They've been all, you know, sort of all over the country. There's 22, I think, postings now, and 16 of those positions are here. I would tell you, from a customer service, production, some of our specialty roles, we've been inundated with amazing resumes. And again, that was part of the silver lining in my mind. Last year, some of these hires that we made would have never happened without companies downsizing and getting rid of some amazing talent, like people that were revenue and relationship attached that looked just like us, but in a, you know, in a different company. So we're the, the beneficiary there. Sacramento, where we're finding the biggest challenge, Brian, is in depth, is in development, technology, database Q&A. They're really sought after. Some of the front end UI, UX stuff we're doing, and platform and technology development is really, really highly sought after resources. And so we're trying to balance how much in-house, right? Our dev team's growing. These were legacy CRElogic folks that ran the same play on the resi side. We're just doing it commercial. When do we, how much can we outsource? We had, you know, hundreds of people in Hyderabad and Bangalore at CRElogic. When do we go there? And how much tribal knowledge do we need in-house? We'd love more of it in-house, but Brian, we're having a hard time finding the right caliber of resource at the right price point in that area. But everything else, we've been really fortunate, and we've had just a ton of resumes and great interviews, and been hiring some really world-class people. Yeah, and I do see there's a lot of people up here from the Bay, and it's still happening. You know, I live in Folsom. If you go to the other side of Folsom, or the other side of 50, they're building 10,000 homes right now, and it's not like they're sitting there very long. People are coming to this area, and that's what, you know, gets me so excited about what's happening in the region and in downtown. This is a great place to be, and I think it just keeps getting better and better.
I saw all those homes going up. East Bidwell is going to be a fun one to get on to 50, but it's going to turn into Sunrise here pretty soon. All right, the next question goes to Alec.
Yeah, actually, I'm going to ask a follow-up to that one just because it came off the top of my head. So it sounds like you're running a hybrid business. You know, you have some folks here locally, you have some folks remote. That's kind of the reality of most early stage business, most businesses, period, in this day and age, right? I'm curious though, in your funding process, I mean, I don't know how remote your team was at the point when you were raising, but, you know, looking around some of the local investors, there's a preference for local. How local is local? How much does that matter in your mind to the folks that you've been raising from? What do they want to see local?
I feel like local was more me or more us than them. Meaning, if you and John, you heard I actually was talking to him earlier. You heard the Sac Angels. I mean, they would love to do everything local, but they're not. I mean, there's just great deals that come to you that are, you know, down in the Bay Area, or they're up in Portland, and they're in Boise, and it's amazing, and you like the deal. We really wanted to do everything locally. I think the DCA's Moneta, Central Valley Fund, the local guys. I saw Laura put up. Mike and Scott and the gang at Winning Street Ventures, they're raising a fund, and so there's money here, and they want to deploy it locally, but they'll go elsewhere, sort of if they could. But the fact that you're headquartered in Sacramento, you've got sort of the who's who investing, you've got a big management team at Sac State, that does play a lot, and I think people really care that the successful. Look at Larry Kelly and what's happening in the rail yards. Look at Mark Friedman and what he did in Ice Block. Just go down and look at Buzz Oak, go down the list of the who's here. They love doing it locally, and they love reinvesting right back in the community. And I don't think that's going to stop.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Jeff, you're next.
Yeah, unless somebody else comes up first. But I was talking with John Phillip in our sort of break room, and he was complimenting you, Anthony, on your forming the leadership team. So I wonder if you could kind of dive into that. You talked about a little bit for kind of some tips and suggestions on forming a winning, awesome leadership team.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think somebody brought up Strength Finders 2.0. We did that at CRElogic. Understanding just your strengths. So you need somebody to pass and somebody to shoot and somebody to block, and that's called a team. And you may have really, broad-based people, but you got to have folks that understand their functional area really cold, and then know how to socialize as a leadership team. I honestly, I don't edict here. I don't mandate here. I socialize, and I strongly suggest, and 9 out of 10 times, we make the right decision. So I was fortunate. I've worked with many of these folks in the past, and we had a lot of success building companies, selling companies, starting companies, etc. And this is such a big market and ripe for disruption that I think I was able to attract these guys and gals at a they could have went and made a lot more money somewhere else, but doing this together is really special. I think there's a component of that, the liking each other and being able to work with each other and be pretty, radically honest with each other is super unique. But you're right, if done right, that chemistry is amazing, and your board sees it, your staff sees it, your business partners see it, and it's important. So the leadership management team is one of the most critical elements of a successful enterprise in my mind.
Awesome. All right, Laura's got her hand raised.
Yeah. So Anthony, you came into, well, I was going to say eScreenLogic. I just can't get used to CREtelligent. Is that how you say it?
So it's pronounced like creative, right? CREtelligent.
CREtelligent.
And it's
okay,
really commercial real estate meets intelligence. Right?
Okay. Thank you. So you joined in 2019. How old was the company then? And are the original founders still there? And what roles do they have in the company if they are there?
Yeah, such a great question. I think that that founder CEO relationship can crater a company or can really make it successful. The original founder, there was two founders of what was eScreenLogic, and it was two guys that brought a Sacramento data business and a Dallas-based environmental consulting business with a geotechnical drilling business. And John Self, I hope to hold his ears on this one, because as I'm pitching the Sac Angels, are like, "What is the drilling business?" I'm like, "I don't know. We own it." So we don't have it anymore, as we shouldn't. But these guys came together with a bunch of assets, created a new company. They saw in commercial real estate that environmental assessment was compulsory, meaning it's done on every deal, and it's really not an automated solution, and it could be. So that was the genesis. That was 2014, right? I didn't join the company until 5 years later. During those 5 years, they grew, they shrunk, they created things, they sold things, they bought things. Both of them were fairly involved in other activities. And I would just say, not derogatory, but they were relatively distracted. They had other things going. What I saw in eScreenLogic was CREtelligent. I saw this broad-based, comprehensive, sort of end-to-end solution set in commercial real estate that was high-tech when you wanted it and high-touch when you needed it, and nobody's doing it. And this was the foundation to be able to do that. The two founders were great. They were supportive. They both participated in the business for probably the next year. Neither one of them, one still sits on the board. Neither of them are employees today. They're all friends and still own shares, and they have invested in the company, and the relationship's good. But this is CREtelligent, in my mind, is a 15-year-old company, or excuse me, a 15-month-old company, right? We pivoted the brand, the posture, the solution set, the technology infrastructure, everything at the end of sort of 2019 to roll into 2020 CREtelligent, and the management team is leading the way.
So who led the look for a new CEO? Did that come from investors, or did it come from the original founders?
Yeah, I think it came from the original founders. One of the original founders was an original founder of CoreLogic, so I had a relationship with him for years. So yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, I've worked with a number of startups, and there reaches a point when sometimes it's time for the founders to go. That they were there, they had it, but they're a lot of times they're who got the idea off the ground to begin with, although in this case it sounds a little different. But there reaches a point when their skills will be better someplace else, and it's time to bring in a professional CEO or other executive. So yeah.
Great. Yeah, no, totally agree. Yeah, and I handled that politely the way you did, as delicately as I could, when I sat with them and said, "I'd like to invite you to be successful somewhere else." And it was a very easy conversation.
All right, looks like we had a question come in the chat. Luciana, do you want to bring that question into the space?
Sure. Thank you, first of all, Anthony. Really appreciate you taking the time to share your insights with us. Mine's kind of more of a scenario question, kind of based on everything you've learned and seen over your journey so far. If you were like startup bootstrapped, looking to raise your first $1.5 million seed round, kind of a scenario question, right? Kind of a fairly good size seed. Who would be your dream team, local investors, if you could, choose, and why?
Wow. Well, I was thinking about what the way you were going to finish that question. I was thinking you'd say, who would be your first call? So I'll hold on that. I think it'd be hard for me to say anything other than the Moneta team. I mean, that the $1.5 million investment is well, small for them, but in their wheelhouse. They have been just incredible partners, and it's unlike trying to get in to see and meet with other firms. I think these guys are very approachable. They're regular people. They're pleasant, and it's not the real hardcore sort of private equity rigmarole. So for $1.5 million investment locally, the dream team would be Moneta Ventures. I think you get a lot of support from the region. They've got an incredible network, and there'd be a lot to do locally. If you ask me who my first call would be when I was thinking about that, I'd probably call Mark Haney. I think he has as much range as anybody I've met in all functional areas of business and everything going on in the region. And he's got a really good, I almost call it an incubator concept and what he can do for businesses. So that would be somebody who, again, over coffee or beer, easy to have a conversation about what about this, what about that, what if scenarios, who would give you straight, honest, authentic, genuine feedback about what he thinks.
Excellent, thank you.
Harsh, you want to bring your question in?
Yeah, thanks, Anthony. That was a very frank answer. And just like to know, maybe as a continuation to that question and the conversation, what were they looking for when you did your first cold call, to raise funding? I mean, what incited them? What excited them? Yeah, hey, this is a company we should invest with, Did you have any particular subject line for your cold emails or anything that you did which this community would find beneficial?
Yeah. I think what any investor is looking for is a return, is the next thing. And how does that materialize? It's with an individual or team who's been there, done that, maybe in another market. So, at Moneta, they weren't real estate technology investors. They didn't understand the commercial real estate ecosystem. They weren't great with platform as a service for the space. But what they saw was a team that, hey, you just ran that same play at a company that went to $1.5 billion. It sounds like all those challenges and problems exist here. You've got a really good roadmap and a solution to get there. And we want to, they were sort of kind of betting on the jockey concept, right? They thought the business model in the market made sense. It was definitely large enough, but that wasn't their area of expertise. What they bet on is that this team, could develop. It was sort of execution risk. You guys got that. We'll give you the money. You got the understanding. Can you guys execute a business plan to get there? So I think that's what most of the investors want. So in a lot of the initial letters, I would talk about First American experience and CoreLogic and what we did and things of that nature to get people to return a call. Yeah.
All right, thanks. Yeah, that should be the key message, probably, right?
And it'd be great if you looked like Bradley Cooper, because I don't, and that didn't help.
Awesome. I'll ask a quick question, then I know Laura has one as well. So for those students that are in the audience and kind of waiting for some of that inspiration to become that entrepreneur, if you were back in that seat, what were some words of wisdom that you wish you would have heard to get started on that entrepreneurial process sooner?
I think it comes to mind extreme ownership. Like where you got to be honest with yourself where you are, and you got to take 100% ownership. It's not your professor's fault. It's not your mom's fault. It's not your pastor's fault. It's not your boss's fault. Like you own it. And I've seen so many people with really good ideas and a little bit of inspiration that didn't get it over the goal line. So you got to be, if you believe in something and you're passionate, life is super long, right? It's really, really a lot longer than you think. You can make a lot of mistakes. You can take some risks. I would say jump in with both feet. That there is a network, and you're seeing a lot of the folks here on this call and in both of these centers and in this region. There's enough people that you can go have an adult conversation with that'll get you fired up about what you're doing or help you not make a bad decision by spending a bunch of time on something that doesn't hunt. Use those resources. I would just say that's, you've got this community, use it.
Awesome. I love that. I never really heard the life is long analogy. So I think that's a good one. Laura, go ahead.
Yeah, so there's a few startups who've come a long way. Well, more than a few in Sacramento, but some that have done so recently. You've got Trifecta, you've got SkySlope, Dial Source, which is now Conquer, and they're employing a lot of people and taking up real estate in the Sacramento region. So let's say 3 years from now, what is there an exit strategy? Is it IPO or acquisition? Do you see your company being a headquartered, one of the signature headquartered companies in the Sacramento region? What do you see? How many people might you be employing if you put on this 3 years in the future kind of hat?
Yeah, it's a great question. Anytime you have outside capital, the stakes are higher and it's more intense, right? It's not, people ask me, are you stressed out? No, not really stressed. Stress is when you have a problem and you don't know what to do about it. Intense is the stakes are really high and you can't mess up. These investors and the next round of investors that will come in, right, that will raise a lot of capital here, want a return on their investment. Their time horizon is not short, meaning it's like 5 to 7 years. When I sit with the executive team, we don't talk about an exit. We don't talk about investment, et cetera. We talk about building a world-class company and doing it right here. So our objective would be, when I look at our capacity plan and the roadmap that decks against our business plan, we're going to hire a lot of people. And we're in Gold River today. And there's space here, and this is a nice little campus, but I would suspect we'll move. If we move closer to downtown, that would be fine. I would like CREtelligent to be a leading company in the region, to be a great place for people to work, to be a great place for people to, be part of the community and part of the region. And that would be our plan. I watch a lot of people say, well, you got investors and now you got to sell the company or go public. 60-70% of investors get paid out from a recapitalization. So you just recapitalize companies along the way. But I can tell you there's nobody sitting here like, man, I can't wait to sell this company in 6 months. We want to build a world-class business right here in Sacramento.
Well, that's awesome. I look forward to seeing that.
Likewise. Awesome. We'll make space. If there's anyone who wants to throw in a question, feel free to use the chat or the raised hand. We'll give it another second or two.
5, 4, 3. Any other questions, anybody?
Awesome. Well, I'll turn it over to Jeff and Laura, but want to say thank you, Anthony, for the time in the conversation. I really enjoyed chatting with you and getting to know you further, as also just as an entrepreneur and someone making an impact in this region. And so I'll turn it back over to Jeff and Laura, and thank you again, Anthony.
All right. Thanks, Cameron, for leading a great Q&A there and a great interview to boot. So, and also, Anthony, I want to thank you for your time and your and coming on and giving your advice and your story to the startups who are coming in behind you. So thanks for that. We really appreciate it.